Hola camaradas, pop quiz, how do you say you in Spanish? Now, this is a trick question, of course, because there are multiple answers. There is tú, there's usted, ustedes, vos, vosotros, vosotras. And a lot of Spanish learning resources really don't go into depth about the various differences between these words for you. They don't explain the history or really the regional differences very well. And this often leaves Spanish students confused and unable to understand Spanish language media from a variety of times and regions. And many of you may already be aware that English is actually a little weird in this regard, in that we only have one word, at least in the standard version of English. And in many dialects, you could refer to one person, the person I'm talking to, or could refer to multiple people, the people I am talking to. You, one person, you, many people. And there are some regional words that people do use to address this kind of problem, like you guys, y'all, youans, but these are generally considered regional, informal, and non standard. It actually, in English, didn't used to be this way. We used to make a distinction where you referred to a group of people, it was already plural, and if you wanted to talk to just one person, used the word thou. Thou art, I'm talking to one person. Ye are, I'm talking to a group of people. So why did we drop thou, at least in the vast majority of English dialects? Well, it's because of formality. It became common practice to address someone of a superior rank or social standing as if they were multiple people. And over time, the word you was used with an increasing number of people, and thou fell almost completely into disuse. And so, understanding this bit of history of the English language is actually really helpful for understanding what happened to Spanish to lead to this kind of complicated situation that we have today. It used to be that we had the singular and informal tu and the plural vos, just like in English and in French for that matter. This will probably be pretty familiar to a lot of people who've studied French and know tu and vous. And so the plural from vos, just like vous in French and you in English, became a way to address one person formally if you wanted to show that they were of a high rank. Over time, both, like the English you, came to be used in more and in more situations. This left a few gaps in the language. And one of those gaps was a way to refer to more than one person. So if you use both for someone, one person formally, it's a little unclear if you use both because one person is being addressed formally or you're just addressing more than one person. So in Spain, they added otros, meaning others, to the end to make it clear. So they say vosotros, you others, when they're referring to more than one person. And because of the rules of how Spanish adjectives works, because this started out as, an adjective, otros, others, this means it's kind of a new gender distinction because now when you're talking to many people and they're all women, you'd use the feminine version, vosotras. And an interesting kind of side effect of this is people all across the Spanish speaking world also added otros to nos. So it used to be we'd say nos in Spanish to refer to us, or we, but by analogy with vosotros, they added on otros, and we get nosotros and nosotras in the entire Spanish-speaking world, and not just like in Spain. In Spain, they use vosotros, but not in Latin America. But the entire world uses nosotros, which is this kind of funny historical coincidence. And so now you can see why you have nosotros in Spanish, but in Latin and a lot of other Romance languages, you either have nos or a very similar word like nu or noi. Now that we know where vosotros came from, the next crucial bit of information is understanding what happened to vos. They actually stopped using it in Spain in large parts of Latin America altogether, like most of Mexico and Peru. But in some places like Argentina and Honduras, vos came to replace tu. And this also came with a simplified conjugation. So with a verb like hablar, vosotros has a form, and the older form of vos also had the same form, where it was habláis. But with the modern usage of vos, you get rid of the I and it's just hablas. And so you'll see this, if an Argentinian is talking and they're using vos like they would tu, the singular you, then it will have the simplified conjugation. In Spain, vosotros will have the longer form with the I. And then if you're reading older documents or literature or something trying to mimic that form of speech, it will also have the longer form. So you have vos habláis in those contexts. And there are some border regions where some people might use both vos and tu with kind of different connotations, but for the most part, in some places, vos is the normal word for you singular, informal that is, and in other places it's associated with regions like Argentina or even that older usage, especially with that conjugation. Now, the final piece of the puzzle is understanding usted and ustedes. Usted is a formal way to address a singular person in all of the Spanish-speaking world. It comes from vuestra merced, which actually means your mercy. It's similar to how in certain English constructions we might say your highness when talking to royalty, or your honor when talking to a judge. Because you aren't referring to someone directly. An interesting kind of side effect of this is you'd use the third person conjugation, even in English. Your highness commands a nation, and not your highness command a nation. And this is true in Spanish as well, even if the etymology of usted is no longer clear and the exact meaning isn't connected to vuestra merced and it's just its own word, we still use the third person singular conjugation when using usted. You still use the third person forms, and it's just like when you say your honor is, your highness is, and not your honor are, and your highness are. And so, for example, it's usted habla if I want to say you formally speak, and it's not usted hablas. And so usted is used formally all across the Spanish-speaking world. Ustedes is also used all across the Spanish-speaking world, and it's just the plural version. But there is a difference between how it's used in Spain and how it's used in Latin America. Because in Spain they also have vosotros and vosotras as informal options. There are cases in Spain where someone would choose between using either vosotros or ustedes. And vosotros is that informal version, ustedes is the formal version. But back in Latin America, ustedes is really kind of your only option if you're talking to people in more than one person, if you want to use the plural form. And of course, we still use the third person conjugation, we just use the third person plural version of the verb. So we say, ustedes hablan. Now, when speaking, you don't have to be able to use all these words and forms. As long as you get the basics down of one specific accent or dialect, you will be able to use that knowledge to communicate across the Spanish-speaking world. Everybody should be able to understand you for the most part, but it is worth learning various forms just to be able to understand Spanish media and Spanish speakers from a variety of places. So if you want to learn Mexican Spanish, for instance, you don't have to learn the vosotros conjugations in the vos form well enough to be able to use them, but I would recommend being able to understand them. Similarly, if you want to speak Spain Spanish, it's still worth understanding the vos form. Or if you learn Argentinian Spanish, you'd want to understand the vosotros and the tu form. Now, if you'd like to learn more about gender, you can click over here. Or if you aren't watching this video when it comes out and you'd like to see the next video in my Spanish series, you can click over here. We're probably going to be talking about ser and estar. But drop me a like if you learned something, and remember, buenas noches, buenos dias, y buenas papas.